the courtroom, I mean, it will be full. Of course, family members, friends, the media, onlookers. There's a lot of interest in this.
Yes, so I'm standing on Lonsdale Street for those of you who know Melbourne, but on William Street around the corner, there is just a massive line of journalists and members of the public who are waiting to get into that courtroom. There will be limited seats available. I'm sure there will be people who miss out on actually getting to be in that courtroom today. My colleague Steph Ferrier earlier spoke to members of the public who had been waiting. As you might know, during the trial, there were court watchers who rocked up to court every day in the Latrobe Valley law courts just to watch the trial, to listen to the evidence. So there's been huge public interest in this case, as you know, and that won't be stopping today.
And that public interest has even been intense outside of Australia. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously there have been local Melbourne journalists covering the case, the usual court journalists that you see here at the Supreme Court, but there have been national media and then, of course, international media. So, podcasts, documentaries even, books are being written about this trial as we speak. So no shortage of attention there. The BBC was covering this trial, our colleagues at the BBC, and then also the Daily Mail had journalists covering the entire trial. So a huge media contingent. I've spoken to colleagues who say this is probably the biggest trial they've ever covered in terms of just the sheer amount of coverage and the sheer amount of journalists who have come along to watch this trial. And that's just due to the insatiable public interest in this case. And, I've thought about this. I'm not really sure what it is that attracts people to this case. It could be a number of reasons. Is it the fact that Erin Patterson is a woman and she's committed these crimes? Is it the mundanity of these crimes taking place at a lunch, at a family lunch in such a small Australian town? Is the murder weapon the fact that mushrooms were used and concealed?
Incoming Paul voice. Incoming Paul voice. Incoming Paul voice. Y'all, I just want to make sure you can hear me okay. And hello, everybody. I saw Down Under, but they're showing the thing pulling up, and so I just went live real quick. So good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Northwest. Hello, everybody. I hope y'all are doing well. So as you see here, this is, finally the day is here. Erin Patterson's sentencing. Now, they're not going to show her in the courtroom. They're just going to show the justice. I forget what his or her name is. So it's going to be a little bit limited, but nonetheless, this is still major. So there you go. So we'll kind of go in and out listening to this. And then again, it's going to be coming up at 7:30 our time. So we're almost there.
A couple of weeks ago, we heard from some of those family members. We heard victim impact statements from them, and this is the opportunity for family members really to address the accused and tell the court about the impacts that the crimes have had on them. So we heard from Ian Wilkinson, the sole surviving guest of the lunch, and one of the things he said is it's one of the distressing shortcomings of our society that so much attention is showered on those who do evil and so little on those who do good. So I guess there he's talking about the extreme attention that we've seen on Erin Patterson as the offender, but the proportionally little attention that we've seen on her victims. And by all accounts, these people, Don and Gail Patterson, Ian and Heather Wilkinson, are incredibly decent people. They were incredibly decent people who will be very missed. Ian Wilkinson is the pastor at the Corumburra Baptist Church. He is very well known, and by extension, Heather too. Very charitable people, very generous people. Don and Gail, very religious people. These people had grandchildren, and in some cases, their parents have actually outlived them. Gail and Heather's father outlived them, and Don's mother outlived him. So these are elderly parents of elderly people who have outlived their children, which is just incredibly sad.
Our reporter Alexandra Alvaro, who is outside the Victoria Supreme Court there. Thank you, and we will return to Alex throughout the morning. Now, Anthony Wheely KC is a former New South Wales Supreme Court judge and chair of the Centre for Public Integrity, and he joins us now. Anthony Wheely, thank you for your time. Firstly, can I get your thoughts, on this momentous decision to broadcast this sentencing live from the court and the reason that that decision has been taken?
Well, I think that the whole idea of opening up the courts by way of live view is a very healthy sign. There's too much mystique around the courts. People don't know what happens there. We find that the shock jocks and some of the commentators make a lot of fuss about sentences being too light. This gives everyone the opportunity to understand how a sentence is formulated and what principles underline it. So it's a very good thing, I think.
Yeah, a lot of transparency in that. The sentencing process, I've heard it described as being mechanical in part, but then ultimately, of course, a judgment call. How would you describe it?
Well, I think it varies from case to case. Sentencing in general terms is very complex and very difficult. But this case is not as difficult as many others because it's generally agreed that the crime committed here was of a very serious kind. The court's task is to weigh up the objective seriousness of the offence and then to determine whether there are any mitigating factors that might ameliorate a stern sentence. And here, there's agreement between the Crown and the defence that probably a life sentence is warranted. The only issue is should there be a parole period, a non-parole period allowed or not. So in that sense, it's easier than some sentencing tasks. I'd also add that there are very few mitigating factors here. This woman, of course, has not committed any serious crime before. That's a mitigating factor. She does have family, but that probably would play very little part in the sentencing. She will be harshly imprisoned, probably in solitary confinement. She'll be at risk from other prisoners, but those are not uncommon features of our prison system, I regret to say. And, they're unlikely to play any great part in the sentencing. So one comes back to the objective seriousness of the offence itself, and there can be no doubt that this was a carefully planned and deliberate murder of 3 people and an attempted murder of another, which really falls into the most serious category of offence.
And Anthony Wheely, when we say a life sentence, what does that mean in Victoria?
Well, the court has the discretion to say that with a life sentence, there will nevertheless come a period of time when the offender may apply for parole to be released into the community. Or they may say that no such period should be allowed. So there's a discretion there. And although it sounds very harsh to say that someone should never be released from prison, where the seriousness of the offence falls into that category, then I think that the judge has that discretion if he thinks the case is appropriate for it.
And we know court reporters, observers of the courts, they're always on the lookout for hints as to which way the judge will go, or to what extent, I should say. Either speaking generally or in this case, do you think you can get a sense of that?
Probably not. Judges are not very opaque when they start their sentencing remarks. He's probably spent quite a bit of time polishing up his decision, and I suspect that he won't give much away till towards the end. So you can have a bet on it if you like, but you can be assured that it will be a very stern sentence, come what may.
What would the appeals process look like should Erin Patterson's lawyers take that option?
Well, she maintains her innocence, so I would expect that she would appeal. And she can appeal against the conviction. She can argue that the jury's decision was unreasonable. She can argue that the judge made errors in the directions he gave to the jury, or maybe she can point to some other manifest inadequacy in the trial. As to the sentence itself, well, again, it's open slather really for her to argue that the sentence is too severe. just as the Crown can argue on an appeal that the sentence was too lenient. So I'm afraid we're going to have a lot more saga play out in this particular matter, even after sentence is passed.
And I know you've described this as a terribly sad and also very unusual case. As part of the sentencing, the judge will read out the elements of this case, won't he?
He will, yes. And I mean, they're well known, of course, to the public. And I think the fact that this was a domestic setting, a family gathering, a lovely meal cooked, so it seemed, the sort of thing that, you know, binds families together, and yet underneath it all was a very terrible, carefully planned plot to kill these people in the most painful way. So that's why there's a fascination with the whole story, I think. It is so different and so unusual from the sort of average everyday crime that we read about in the papers.
And that is in part the reasoning behind today's decision to broadcast this live in a Victorian Supreme Court first. And I know we spoke to that a moment ago, but what do you hope is gained from that live broadcast today for those watching on?
Well, I hope that people will understand the process better. I think they'll see that sentencing is quite complicated and not something that can be done lightly or easily. And I think more importantly, it just enables the community, in a sense, to be part of the whole process, just as the jury who decided guilt or innocence were part of the process. So now the community can listen into this, and they are part of the process of seeing justice done, and justice done correctly. And I think that's very important.
And that process, we're told, will take around 45 minutes. Obviously, that's an estimate there. But just tell us what we can expect that to look like.
Well, I'm surprised that it's only going to take 45 minutes because, you know, in Sydney, for example, we've had a couple of trials where I've seen a live broadcast and they've taken a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours. So the fact that this is only 45 minutes means that we might be getting a kind of pared down version of the sentence. I expect that's probably right. He won't go through every single fact was at issue in the trial. He couldn't possibly do that in 45 minutes. So good on him, because I do think that the more quickly these things are done, the easier it is for the public to appreciate, and for the journalists who want to make notes and publish what's happened. It's a lot easier if the thing can be done relatively quickly.
Anthony Wheely, KC, a former New South Wales Supreme Court judge and chair of the Centre for Public Integrity. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
A pleasure.
And let's return to our reporter, Alexandra Alvaro, who is outside the Supreme Court. Alex, let's go to the victims in this case. What did we learn about them during this trial?
Yeah, well, as you say, that Ian Wilkinson did just arrive at court about 15 minutes ago. He's the sole surviving guest of the lunch, Pastor Ian Wilkinson. And we did hear from him last time he was in court. He gave a victim impact statement. This is the opportunity for victims of crimes to essentially address the offender and the court and tell them what the impact of the crime was on them and their family. So we did hear from Ian Wilkinson. He spoke about his wife, Heather, the impact of losing her, the fact that he's now living a single life, really, and that her lack of company has taken the joy out of pottering around the garden, pottering around the house. And so he also spoke about the ongoing impacts on his health. He once again thanked the doctors who took care of him while he was in hospital. We know that he was in hospital for about 2 months after that mushroom lunch. He was in a coma for a lot of that time. He was very, very unwell. Doctors said that they thought he was going to die. So he spoke about the fact that his liver function hasn't really returned to normal and his energy levels aren't the same as they used to be. He also spoke about forgiveness, and we know that Pastor Ian Wilkinson is a deeply religious man, And he extended an olive branch to Erin Patterson, essentially. He said, I offer you forgiveness. I bear no ill will. I hope that she uses this time in jail to essentially become a better person. And one of the quotes was, now I am no longer Erin Patterson's victim. She has become the victim of my kindness. So a really powerful quote from Ian Wilkinson there. We also heard from the daughter of Pastor Ian Wilkinson and Heather Wilkinson, Ruth Dubois. She spoke about the resilience of her father, Ian Wilkinson, and that's something we've seen throughout the trial. He was there every day in court, listening to the evidence very stoically. He never really gave anything away on his face as he was listening to that evidence. But we heard from Ruth Dubois. She spoke about, Ian Wilkinson's strength, the fact that she misses her mother so much, and she spoke about Erin Patterson in the way that, you had many available opportunities not to carry out this crime, and yet you still did. And she said, I don't know how you would choose this for your children. Erin Patterson's children obviously now left without a mother. Their mother is in jail. And we also heard from Simon Patterson on that matter. He said, their family has been changed. Their children now live in a broken family with the knowledge that their mother killed their grandparents. And Simon Patterson also took aim at the media. He was frustrated by the invasion of privacy. He said he'd been chased, followed, stalked. One of the quotes was, I doubt I'll get used to being treated in such a dehumanizing way by these creepy strangers who regard humans as merely content to further their media careers. So he was quite scathing in regard to the coverage of the trial. And Ruth Dubois also touched on that, the fact that in some cases their trauma has been used as entertainment. So that's what we heard really through the victim impact statements when we were in court last. And we also heard, interestingly, about Erin Patterson's custody arrangements, if you wanted to touch on that as well. She is kept in a cell basically for 22 to 24 hours a day. She's guarded quite closely, and that is due to her notoriety. And this is something that her defence team said Justice Beale should take into account when sentencing, that because of her notoriety, she has to be supervised. So she has more limited access to other things in prison, for example, the library and what have you. We also heard that she has access in her prison cell to a television. She's an avid crocheter, so in her cell she does have some items that she's crocheted. She has access to a hair straightener. So we heard really all kinds of things about her custody arrangements as well.
Yeah, so for those watching and those just joining us, convicted triple murderer Erin Patterson will soon be sentenced by a judge in the Victorian Supreme Court. This will mark the conclusion of the mushroom murder case that, as we know, has gripped the world, and that will be broadcast live. We will be broadcasting that here on the ABC in what is a first for the Victorian Supreme Court, to allow everybody to see that process and give transparency to that. Alex, we spoke about this a little earlier, but tell us why that decision has been made in this case that has had so much interest from here in Australia, but of course overseas as well.
Yeah, so essentially, as you say, the court has opened this up to be televised live. It's a highly unusual decision. We don't see that very often. We know that in the case of George Pell at the county court, that was also broadcast live. But here at the Supreme Court, that's never happened, according to the media team at the Supreme Court. And the reason that that was done, Justice Beale said, was so that the reasons for the sentence could be delivered promptly and completely. And he's completely aware of, the huge public interest in this case. So when we do see that broadcast beamed in, and we will bring it to you live, we'll see a shot of Justice Beale. We won't be able to see the rest of the courtroom. It will just be a shot of Justice Beale. Only the people in the courtroom will be able to see Erin Patterson, her reaction, which will be something that journalists will be watching very keenly. If you remember, during the verdict, Erin didn't really give much away. She was emotionless. She blinked rapidly. This is something that we saw from her during the trial. But other than that, we didn't really see her give much away. So I think journalists will be looking very keenly today for how Erin Patterson reacts to the sentence being handed down. So, as I say, Justice Beale will deliver his sentence, and then Erin Patterson will be rounded back into the prison van. We saw it arrive not long ago, so she is in.
Okay, y'all, I'm going to read over here on the screen the live updates that are kind of coming through on this other thing so we can be on that page. Okay, so what is Justice Beale considering? Justice Beale is scheduled to speak for 45 minutes as he hands down Erin's sentence. He has spent the past 2 weeks considering the severity and length of the sentence, as well as whether Patterson should have a chance at parole at some stage in the future. When considering a sentence, the judge will have to take into account both aggravating factors, which may warrant a heavier sentence, and mitigating factors, which may lead to a lighter sentence. Aggravating factors could include pre-planning the crime, premeditation, committing the crime as part of a group against an outnumbered victim, use of a weapon, including a pretend weapon, a breach of trust by the offender towards the victim. Now, hold on, let me go over here real quick, okay? Just checking on that screen. Prosecutors have argued that Erin's breach of trust, use of poisonous weapon, and planning the poisonings all constitute aggravating factors. Mitigating factors could include the age of the offender, the background of the offender, the previous good character of the offender, and the effect of prison on the offender. The defense has argued Patterson's isolation in jail due to safety reasons has meant that her time behind bars has been particularly difficult and psychologically harsh, serving as a mitigating factor. Okay, now she's escorted into court. She arrives at court. Ian arrives at court 28 minutes ago. Today's sentencing signals an end to the Supreme Court trial that was held in the regional town of Morel over a marathon 9 weeks of evidence. After today, Patterson has 28 days to apply for an appeal. Okay, wait, hold on.
Her, but we can't forget.
Okay, let me go back. An appeal against a conviction could be lodged on the basis that the jury's verdict was unreasonable on the evidence presented, or that a judge made an error in their instructions to the jury. Patterson could also lodge an appeal against her sentence if she wants to argue that it's excessive. The prosecution can also appeal against the sentence if it doesn't think it's long enough. So, y'all, that's crazy, right? I mean, can you imagine? So the prosecution's like, nope. So I wonder what happens if he says life with parole and the prosecution's like, no, we want it to be life with no parole. If they can appeal, or if they'll be like, we're good. I guess it depends on the like at what stage. So for example, if they're like life with parole, but parole after 50 years, well, I mean, she's not going to be coming out, right? Like, hold on, I'm going to go back to this for a second. Please hold.
She has arrived this morning. What do we know of her movements today?
So she arrived in a prison van. She's come all the way from Deer Park. For those who know Melbourne, it's where Dame Phyllis Frost Centre is. It's a maximum security women's prison. That is where Erin Patterson is being housed, where she is in custody. She's come all the way to the Supreme Court. She's been dropped off in a prison van. It's quite a long vehicle with a number of windows across the top of it. So she's arrived in that vehicle with some PSOs guarding those doors. She's probably filing into the courtroom now, surrounded or flanked by a couple of PSOs who will sit with her during the sentence. And there she'll sit for about 45 minutes listening to Justice Beale hand down that sentence. And during that time, Justice Beale will essentially recap some of the evidence that we heard earlier in the case. He'll recap some of the offending. He'll talk about some of the mitigating and the aggravating factors that he's considered in relation to her sentence. And then he will deliver that sentence.
Just for our viewers, we will be going to that any moment now. As soon as it begins, we will go to that. Alex, in the meantime, why do you think there has been so much interest in this case?
Yeah, it's absolutely impossible to know. I think from talking to some of those court watchers, a lot of them say that, Erin Patterson could be your next door neighbour. She's very unassuming. She's not a typical murderer, if that makes sense. She's a woman. And the murder weapon used in this case was poisonous mushrooms, which is incredibly peculiar. It's highly unusual. So I think that's one element. I think also the fact that this has happened in a very small Australian town in Gippsland. The community in Leongatha is very small. That is where the lunch was hosted, and then also it takes in victims, this case from Corumburra, another small community where the sole surviving guest of the lunch, Pastor Ian.
We're taking you now to the court.
Erin Patterson, after a long trial, during which you gave evidence that the poisoning of your 4 lunch guests on the 29th of July was an accident, the jury found you guilty of 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. In other words, the jury necessarily found that you deliberately served poison meals to Gail and Don Patterson and Heather and Ian Wilkinson, and that you did so intending to kill them. Only Ian Wilkinson survived. The maximum penalty for murder is life imprisonment, and for attempted murder, 25 years imprisonment. Murder is also a standard sentence offence, and the standard sentence offence for murder is 25 years imprisonment. The prosecution submits, and your counsel concedes, that your offending falls into the worst category of offending for these offences, and that you should receive the maximum penalties for your crimes. I agree, for reasons that I will come to in due course. The prosecution also submits that, having regard to the horrendous nature of your crimes, I should not fix a non-parole period. In other words, the prosecution submits that you should never have the opportunity of being released from prison on parole. Your counsel challenged this submission, relying principally on the harsher than usual conditions of your imprisonment, which both sides agree are likely to continue for the foreseeable future. Whether or not to fix a non-parole period is the main dispute which I have to determine. These sentencing reasons consist of 4 parts. First, the circumstances of the offences. Second, your circumstances. Third, relevant sentencing law. And fourth, the actual sentences. It is convenient at this stage to mention one aspect of sentencing law. Where the prosecution alleges circumstances that aggravate your offending, the prosecution must prove those circumstances beyond reasonable doubt. Where the defence alleges circumstances of mitigation, the defence must prove those circumstances on the balance of probabilities. Just before I turn to the circumstances of your offences, I note that at your trial, the prosecution conceded that they could not prove motive. As is standard, I directed the jury that the prosecution did not have to prove motive, only the elements of the offences, and that, quote, some murders occur for no apparent reason. The motives for such murders may only ever be known to the offenders. Clearly, the jury was satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that you committed the alleged offences. Only you know why you committed them. I will not be speculating about that matter. I will begin my discussion of the circumstances of your offences with the fact that you were familiar with the iNaturalist website from at least May 2022. That is a website on which people can post and view sightings of death-cap mushrooms, amongst other things. On the 28th of May 22, you accessed the iNaturalist website and navigated to its worldwide map in relation to sightings of death-cap mushrooms. Using that map, you accessed information concerning the sighting of death-cap mushrooms in Moorabbin, a suburb of Melbourne. In late 22, a dispute arose between you and your estranged husband, Simon Patterson, regarding child support payments for your 2 young children who live with you. In December 22, you referred to that dispute in your communications with a Facebook Messenger group with whom you shared an interest in true crime. You were scathing in your remarks about both Simon and his parents, Don and Gail Patterson. Amongst other things, you derided your father-in-law's suggestion that you and Simon get together and pray for your children, commenting, quote, "This family, I swear to fucking God." You called them, quote, "a lost cause." You wondered whether they had, quote, "any capacity for self-reflection at all." You said, quote, "fuck 'em," and that you suspected the best thing you could do was, quote, "just to forget about all of them and live your life." You accused Simon of, quote, "gaslighting you," and Don and Gail of using, quote, "weasel words." You called Simon, quote, "a deadbeat," and wondered why Gail was not, quote, "horrified" by his stance regarding child support. According to your testimony at trial, and to a lesser extent Simon's testimony, the dispute over child support had resolved by early 23. On the 18th of April 23, one Christine McKenzie, a former poison specialist, was visiting her daughter in Lock, which is a small town about a 25-minute drive northwest of Leongatha, where you lived. Miss McKenzie observed death cap mushrooms in Lock Reserve and posted details of her observations, including photographs, on the iNaturalist's website the same day. Ms. McKenzie disposed of all the death cap mushrooms that she could find because of the danger she thought they posed, especially to young children. On the morning of the 28th of April 23, your mobile phone, which was never recovered by investigators, connected to certain cell towers consistent with a possible visit by you to the Lock Reserve. That afternoon, you purchased a food dehydrator in Leongatha. Between the 28th of April and the 4th of May 23, you photographed forage mushrooms on the trays of your dehydrator. The images were found by investigators on a Samsung tablet later seized from your home. Dr. Tom May, a world-renowned expert in fungi, gave evidence at your trial that those images were, quote, "consistent with death cap mushrooms to a high degree of confidence." On the 21st of May 23, Dr. May observed death cap mushrooms in Nielsen Street, Outram. Outram is a small town about a 23-minute drive southwest of Leongatha. Later that day, Dr. May posted details of his observations, including photographs, on the iNaturalist website. On the morning of the 22nd of May 23, your phone connected to certain cell towers consistent with a possible visit by you to Lock Reserve. Later that morning, your phone connected to certain cell towers consistent with a possible visit by you to Nielsen Street, Outram. On the 24th of June 23, you hosted a lunch at your Leongatha home attended by Don and Gail and your children. You had invited Simon to that lunch, but he declined, saying in a text message, quote, "Hi, Erin. Thank you for your kind lunch invite, together with Mum and Dad. I'm sorry, I'll decline, as I feel too uncomfortable about it." Between the 28th of June and the 7th of July 23, there were a series of messages between you and Gail in which you falsely represented that you had undergone a needle biopsy for a lump in your arm and an MRI. In response to a message from Gail as to how you got on with your medical tests, you messaged her on the 7th of July 23 that, quote, "There's a bit to digest with everything that's come out of it all. I might talk more about it with you both when I see you in person." On the 16th of July 23, you attended the Sunday service at the Courtroom Baptist Church, where Ian Wilkinson was and is the pastor. After the service, you invited Gail and Don Patterson and Heather and Ian Wilkinson to lunch at your home at Gibson Street, Leongatha, on the 29th of July 23. Both the Pattersons and the Wilkinsons were surprised by the invitation, as the Wilkinsons had never previously been invited to a meal at your home. You also invited Simon, telling him that you had invited his parents and his aunt and uncle. You told him you had some important medical news which you wanted to discuss at the lunch and that you did not want the children to be present. Simon initially accepted your invitation and informed his parents that the purpose of the lunch was to discuss your medical issues and how to inform the children. On the evening of the 28th of July 23, Simon and you exchanged messages. Simon's read, quote, "Sorry, I feel too uncomfortable about coming to the lunch with you, Mum, Dad, Heather and Ian tomorrow. But I am happy to talk about your health and implications of that at another time if you'd like to discuss on the phone. Just let me know." You replied 5 minutes later, quote, "That's really disappointing. I've spent many hours this week preparing lunch for tomorrow, which has been exhausting in light of the issues I'm facing, and spent a small fortune on beef eye fillet to make beef Wellingtons because I wanted it to be a special meal, as I may not be able to host a lunch like this again for some time. It's important to me that you're all there tomorrow and that I can have the conversations that I need to have. I hope you'll change your mind. Your parents and Heather and Ian are coming at 12:30. I hope to see you there." On Saturday, the 29th of July 23, you served your 4 lunch guests individual beef Wellingtons, which were deliberately poisoned with death cap mushrooms. You gave evidence at your trial that had Simon attended the lunch, you would also have served him a beef Wellington. I accept the evidence of Ian Wilkinson that you served your guests their meals on 4 grey plates, while your individual beef Wellington was on a smaller orangey tan coloured plate, a fact that Heather also commented on to Ian and Simon the next day. I find that you did this to ensure that you did not mistakenly consume a poisoned meal. I also accept the evidence of Ian Wilkinson that at the conclusion of the meal, you falsely told your guests that you had been diagnosed with cancer and sought their advice as to whether and how you should break the news to your children that you had a life-threatening illness. Not long after this conversation started, your son and his friend, who had gone to a movie, returned home. The conversation about cancer ceased, but not before all your lunch guests, at Ian's suggestion, prayed for your health. Soon after, they left. Around midnight to 1 a.m. on Sunday the 30th of July 23, all of your lunch guests fell seriously ill, suffering repeated vomiting and diarrhoea. On Sunday morning, Gail and Don informed Simon of their conditions and called an ambulance, which took them to nearby Corumburra Hospital. Simon attended the Wilkinsons' home to find that Heather and Ian were similarly unwell. He took them first to Corumburra Hospital, but was redirected to Leongatha Hospital because of limited resources. By way of contrast, you made a round trip of approximately 2 hours on Sunday afternoon to take your son to a flying lesson at Tyab. By the Sunday evening, Don and Gail had been transferred to Dandenong Hospital. On the morning of Monday, the 31st of July, 23, Ian and Heather were also transferred to Dandenong Hospital. Later that day, Gail and Don were transferred to the Austin Hospital, as were Heather and Ian on Tuesday, the 1st of August 23. All of them were experiencing advanced multiple organ failure. Having learned from Simon on the Sunday that your parents-in-law had been hospitalised, you attended Leongatha Hospital on the Monday, complaining of diarrhoea. You did not stay long. Shortly after a doctor indicated to you that death cap mushroom poisoning was suspected, you left, despite warnings by another doctor and nurse that your life was in danger. You returned over an hour and a half later. When you returned, you showed reluctance to receive treatment for suspected death cap mushroom poisoning and to organise a medical assessment for your children who were at school. Medical staff were urging you to have the children assessed because you claimed, falsely, that on the Sunday night you fed them the leftovers of the beef Wellingtons with the pastry and mushrooms scraped off. Eventually, you arranged with Simon to collect the children and bring them to hospital. On the Monday morning, police recovered beef Wellington remains from a bin outside your home, which were later found to contain death cap mushroom toxins. On the Monday afternoon, you were transferred to Monash Medical Centre in Clayton. Simon brought the children there. You and the children were kept in hospital overnight for observation. At both Leongatha Hospital and Monash Medical Centre, you were asked by various people, including doctors and representatives of the Health Department and the Child Protection Service, where you had sourced the mushrooms for the beef Wellingtons. You said you had purchased some fresh mushrooms at Woolworths and some dried mushrooms from an Asian grocery. You were vague about the location of the Asian grocery, claiming you had purchased the dried mushrooms several months before and that the shop could have been in one of a number of suburbs that fall within the boundaries of the city of Monash. You denied having foraged for mushrooms, a lie repeated in your recorded police interview on the 5th of August 23. At your trial, you maintained the story about having sourced some of the mushrooms from an Asian grocery, but testified that in May and June of 23, you had foraged for edible mushrooms in various places, including the Corumburra Botanical Gardens. You testified that you had dehydrated these mushrooms and put them in a container which contained the dried mushrooms from the Asian grocery, and that you used the dried mushrooms in that container along with the fresh mushrooms from Woolworths in the beef Wellingtons. You testified that in this way, death-capped mushrooms must have accidentally found their way into the meals served to your lunch guests. The jury rejected this elaborate explanation. They found that you deliberately poisoned the meals of your lunch guests. I am satisfied that your vague story about the Asian grocery was a lie. When you realised that the lie would not work because death-capped mushrooms cannot be cultivated commercially, and there were no other reports of people falling ill from mushrooms purchased at Asian groceries, you changed tack. You concocted the story you told the jury about foraged mushrooms ending up in the container with the Asian grocery mushrooms and then accidentally ending up in the beef Wellingtons. On the afternoon of Tuesday, the 1st of August 23, you and the children were discharged from Monash Hospital. On the morning of the 2nd of August 23, you disposed of your dehydrator at a local tip, the Coonawarra transfer station. On the 4th of August 23, investigators recovered your dehydrator from the tip. Forensic examination revealed that the dehydrator contained traces of death-capped mushrooms. That same day, 4th of August 23, Heather Wilkinson, aged 66, and Gail Patterson, aged 70, died from death-capped mushroom poisoning. And Don Patterson, who was desperately ill, was given a liver transplant. On the 5th of August 23, the police executed a search warrant at your home. You handed over a dummy phone. It was not the phone that you had been using throughout most of 23, the phone which on the 28th of April 23 had connected to certain cell towers indicating a possible visit to Lock, and which on the 22nd of May 23 had connected to certain cell towers indicating possible visits to Lock and Outram. In your recorded interview following the search, you denied having foraged for mushrooms and denied owning a dehydrator. Late on the 5th of August 23, Don Patterson, aged 70, died from death-capped mushroom poisoning. Ian Wilkinson very nearly died, but gradually his condition improved. On the 21st of August 23, he was discharged from the intensive care unit to a ward at the Austin Hospital. On the 11th of September 23, he was moved to the Heidelberg Repatriation Hospital. On the 21st of September 23, he was discharged home. He has not fully recovered. He has reduced kidney function, ongoing respiratory issues, and reduced energy. On the 2nd of November 23, the police executed another search warrant at your home, seizing more electrical devices. You were arrested and charged. You have been in custody ever since. Let me now summarise the aggravating circumstances of your offending. Your offending, which resulted in the death of 3 people and near death of another, involved substantial premeditation. I am satisfied that by the 16th of July 23, when you unusually invited Simon, his parents and his aunt and uncle to a lunch without the children, to discuss your non-existent medical issues, you did so with the intention of killing them all. The dehydrator, which you purchased in late April 23, enabled you to preserve death cap mushrooms, which you put into the individual beef Wellingtons served to your guests. Whether those death cap mushrooms came from Lock on the 28th of April 23, or from Lock or Outram on the 22nd of May 23, or from another location in May or June of 23, as you suggested in your testimony, is in my view of no great moment. After learning from Simon on Sunday the 30th of July 23 that some or all of your lunch guests had been hospitalised, you showed no pity for your victims. Instead of informing those treating the Pattersons and Wilkinsons that you had used foraged mushrooms, which you could have done without having to admit that you had deliberately poisoned their meals, you repeatedly denied foraging, insisting that the mushrooms for the beef Wellingtons were sourced solely from Woolworths and an Asian grocery. We will never know whether revealing the use of foraged mushrooms would have made a difference. But the administration of the drug psilocybin, which is a specific antidote for death cap mushroom poisoning, was not commenced on the 30th of July 23 because at that stage, the evidence regarding the type of toxin was inconclusive. Similarly, the administration of NAC to preserve the victims' livers from toxins was not commenced until almost midnight on the 30th of July 23 for Don Patterson and on the 31st of July 23 for the others. The prosecution submitted that I should infer from your pitiless behaviour that your intention to kill was ongoing and that this constitutes an additional aggravating circumstance. I accept that submission. As the Wilkinsons' daughter, Ruth Dubois, remarked in her victim impact statement, you, quote, followed through on your lethal plan. Your lunch guests each suffered severe gastrointestinal illness on the Sunday and Monday prior to being sedated and mechanically ventilated. Their suffering was protracted. And Ian Wilkins suffers ongoing health issues. This aggravates your offending. The prosecution submitted that you must have anticipated that your victims would suffer in the way they did. I am satisfied of that beyond reasonable doubt. It is implausible that you would have selected death cap mushrooms without ascertaining how they would work upon your victims. Further, the devastating impact of your crimes is not limited to your direct victims. Your crimes have harmed a great many people. I will expand on this aggravating circumstance when I turn to the victim impact statements. In addition to denying the use of foraged mushrooms, you engaged in an elaborate cover-up of your guilt. I find that you disposed of the 4 grey plates on which you served the poisoned beef Wellingtons. You falsely made out that you had fed your children leftover beef Wellingtons with the pastry and mushrooms scraped off. You feigned illness. You disposed of the dehydrator soon after you were released from hospital. You maintained the vague story about sourcing dried mushrooms at an Asian grocery and had the gall to tell police in your recorded police interview that you had been very, very helpful to the health department in its investigation of the incident. You disposed of your phone and provided police with a dummy phone. You lied to the police in your recorded police interview about various matters. Finally, and most importantly, your offending involved an enormous betrayal of trust. Your victims were all your relatives by marriage. More than that, they had all been good to you and your children over many years, as you acknowledged in your testimony. Not only did you cut short 3 lives and cause lasting damage to Ian Wilkinson's health, thereby devastating the extended Patterson and Wilkinson families, you inflicted untold suffering on your own children, whom you robbed of their beloved grandparents. The victim impact statements reveal the immense and ongoing anguish suffered by your many victims, direct and indirect. No summary could do justice to the individual and collective power of those statements. It is not my intention here to summarise or refer to every statement, but rather to highlight some key aspects. 4 generations of the extended Patterson and Wilkinson families have been traumatised by your crimes, not to mention their friends. Don's mother, Martha Patterson, who is aged 100, made a victim impact statement. In it, she prayed for God's healing for her family. Gail and Heather's father, now deceased, also reached his 100th birthday in 2024, but tragically, only one of his 3 daughters, Lynn Young, whose statement was read to the court, was alive to mark that milestone with him. And there are many references in the statements to the trauma experienced by the Patterson and Wilkinson grandchildren. Many of your adult victims struggled not only with the loss of their loved ones and the terrible way they died, but with the distress, even guilt, at their own seeming inability to ease the suffering of those close to them. They keenly feel their limitations, and in particular, the impossibility of shielding the youngest from the incessant discussion of the case in the media, online, in public spaces, even in the schoolyard. Many also struggled to cope with work and studies, and many have experienced additional financial burdens. There is, of course, great anger at the callousness of your actions. To take just one example, Ian Wilkinson's sister, Dorothy Dicker, questions, quote, how anyone could sit there and watch those 4 kind and caring people eat that meal. Your failure to exhibit any remorse pours salt into all the victims' wounds. The children of your direct victims speak of the distress of watching their parents suffer in hospital. For example, Don and Gail's son Matthew remarks, quote, watching my parents suffer in hospital from severe poisoning caused shock, grief and lasting trauma. Ian and Heather's son David remembers his mother being, quote, desperate for water, which she was not allowed by medical staff, and saying her, quote, insides were burning. David also mentions his father's tortured experience, quote, black lips, gaunt face, pained and serious expression. At your plea hearing, Ian Wilkinson memorably read his victim impact statement to the court. Amongst other things, he humbly expressed his great admiration and love for his wife, Heather, and his concern for others, even you. He offered you forgiveness for what you did to him. Quote, in regards to the many harms done to me, I make an offer of forgiveness to Erin. I say harms done to me advisedly. I have no power or responsibility to forgive harms done to others. However, I encourage Erin to receive my offer of forgiveness for those harms done to me with full confession and repentance. I bear her no ill will. That offer of forgiveness presents you with an opportunity. You would do well to embrace it in the manner he suggests. In commenting on the unprecedented coverage of your case, Ian Wilkinson also made this point, quote, it's one of the distressing shortcomings of our society that so much attention is showered on those who do evil and so little on those who do good. Your lunch guests undoubtedly belong to that company of people among us who do good. The victim impact statements make it clear that each one of them, over many years, gave of themselves generously and made lasting contributions to many, many lives, and in Ian's case, continues to make. All of them, inspired by their Christian faith, were deeply invested not only in their families but in their wider communities, as the statements from members of the Currumbara Baptist Church attest. A word that is used again and again in the statements to describe your crimes is, quote, senseless. But what also surfaces in the statements is hope and gratitude for the care shown by others. Don and Gail's daughter, Anna Terrington, writes, quote, "We have to say goodbye for now to Mum and Dad and Heather." Don's brother, Colin, writes, quote, "As Christians, they were people of hope. And sharing that hope, my loss is not one marked by despair." Ruth Dubois expresses her great appreciation for the efforts made and compassion shown by the medical teams. Simon Patterson gives thanks, quote, "for the incredibly strong, gentle, patient and caring support from friends, family, schools, our own church congregation, the wider church, colleagues, work clients, neighbours, police, government officers and our professional counsellors. We have experienced love in a special way since the murders." I will conclude my account of key aspects of the victim impact statements with what Don and Gail's son Matthew had to say about your betrayal of trust. Quote, "Erin was embraced as part of the Patterson family. She was welcomed and treated with genuine love and respect in a way she did not appear to experience from her own family. Her actions represent a profound and devastating betrayal of the trust and love extended to her. Having regard to the aggravating circumstances of your offending and the victim impact statements, I have no hesitation in finding that your offending falls into the worst category for the offences of murder and attempted murder. As the case law makes clear, the fact that it is possible to imagine even worse instances of such offences does not refute that categorisation. The gravity of your offending warrants the imposition of the maximum penalties for your crimes. I turn then to your circumstances. The information I was provided about your personal history was minimal. Your counsel simply relied on the personal history you provided in your trial testimony. There were no psychiatric or psychological reports provided, no references from character witnesses. No doubt that approach to your plea hearing was based on your instructions, but it means the account of your personal history that I am about to give is limited. You were born in Adelaide on the 30th of September 1974, making you 48 years old at the time of your offending and 50 now. Your maiden name was Scudder. In 1977, your family relocated to Melbourne, residing in Hampton. In 2004, you and Simon Patterson met whilst you were both employed at Monash City Council. Simon told the jury that he was working there as a civil engineer and you were the RSPCA's representative on the council. By 2005, you and Simon were romantically involved. In 2006, your grandmother died, leaving you a substantial inheritance. Monies from her estate were distributed between 2007 and 2015. During those years, you would be generous with your money to Simon's siblings, providing large, no-interest loans to them and their spouses so that they could purchase their own homes. On the 2nd of June 2007, you and Simon married. You told the jury that your parents did not attend the wedding. They were holidaying in Russia. Soon after your marriage, you and Simon travelled around Australia and overseas for a few months before settling in Perth. Simon got a job working for an inner-city shire council. In 2009, when you were 34, your son was born. In April 2009, you and Simon set off with the baby to explore the top end of Australia. You reached Townsville in November 2009, at which point you parted company. You flew back to Perth. Simon drove back with the baby. You rented a cottage for you and the baby. Simon rented an on-site caravan close by. This was the first of many comparatively short-term separations. You reunited by the end of January 2010. In 2011, your father died. In that year, you also opened a second-hand bookshop in Pemberton, Western Australia. In 2013, when you were pregnant, you and Simon returned to Victoria with your son to live closer to Simon's family. In 2014, your daughter was born. In 2015, you and Simon separated permanently. In 2019, your mother died, leaving you an inheritance. In June 22, you and your children moved into a newly constructed home at 84 Gibson Street, Leongatha, the home at which you served the fatal lunch on the 29th of July 23. You have no relevant criminal history. You maintain your innocence. In other words, there is no evidence of remorse. I turn now to the conditions of your imprisonment. As mentioned, you have been in custody since the 2nd of November 23. There were 2 affidavits tendered relating to your conditions of imprisonment. The first was sworn by a solicitor who acts for you and was based largely on your instructions. The second affidavit was sworn by Jennifer Hosking, Assistant Commissioner, Sentence Management Division at Corrections Victoria, who also testified at your plea hearing. Ms. Hosking's evidence included confirmation of the following matters. You have a, quote, maximum security rating and, quote, major offender status. Because of the nature of your crimes and your notoriety, you have been assessed as being at significant risk from other prisoners. You have not been assessed as posing a risk to other prisoners. You have spent approximately 16 months of your 22 months at Dame Phyllis Frost Centre in a management unit called the Gordon Unit, and the rest of the time in a protection unit called the Murray Unit. A management unit is more restrictive than a protection unit. You have been in the Gordon Unit continuously for the last 15 months. The Gordon Unit has about 20 cells. You are not permitted to mix with the other women in the Gordon Unit. You have spent at least 22 hours in your cell every day that you have been in the Gordon Unit. There have been 16 days since November 24 where, because of lockdowns, you have been confined to your cell for the entire 24 hours per day. The maximum period that a prisoner in the Gordon Unit could have out of their cell on any given day is 4 hours, but, quote, that wouldn't happen very often. Your meals and medicine are currently delivered through a flap in your cell door. There is a small concrete yard, approximately 2 metres by 1.5 metres, which adjoins your cell, which, with permission, you may access for fresh air. If prisoners are using the larger exercise yard, which abuts your exercise yard, you may not use your small yard. During your time in the Gordon Unit, you have barely had any contact with other individuals. Permission is required for you to communicate with any other prisoner, which, according to your counsel, is complicated by the fact that you are not informed of the identities of the other prisoners in the Gordon Unit. You currently have approval to communicate with one other prisoner in the Gordon Unit through a wire mesh when the 2 of you are permitted to use your respective adjoining exercise yards. That other prisoner is undergoing a lengthy sentence for terrorism offences and has attacked other prisoners. You did not ask to communicate with that person and have not communicated with her. The suggestion that you should communicate with her was made by a corrections officer. There is an intercom in your cell which, if permission is granted, you may use to communicate with one other prisoner in the unit at a time, but you have not done so. In order to attend any other part of the prison, for example, the visitors centre or the library, you are driven there escorted by 2 corrections officers. While theoretically prisoners in the Gordon Unit are able to access the prison library twice per week for 20 minutes at a time, you have not been able to do so because of staff shortages and a rule that you may not access the library if another is doing so. Consequently, you have only been able to access the library a handful of times during your time in the Gordon Unit. United Nations guidelines, known as the Bangkok Rules, provide that a prisoner should not be in separation for more than 15 days at a time, but you have now been in separation continuously for 15 months. There are 2 prisoners in the Gordon Unit who have been there in excess of 3 years. And whilst the primary principle in the placement of prisoners is to manage and place them in the least restrictive environment, necessary to ensure the safety and security of the individual prisoner and other prisoners, the least restrictive environment can be very restrictive. As for your future conditions of imprisonment, whilst your placement in the Gordon unit is reviewed monthly, Ms Hosking was unable to say whether you would ever be moved from the Gordon unit. I infer that given the unprecedented media coverage of your case and the books, documentaries and TV series about you, which are all in the pipeline, you are likely to remain a notorious prisoner for many years to come, and as such remain at significant risk from other prisoners. I turn then to a number of relevant sentencing principles and rules. Section 5 of the Sentencing Act 1991 declares that the only purposes for which sentences may be imposed are just punishment, specific and general deterrence, rehabilitation, denunciation, and protection of the community. I have had regard to all of these sentencing purposes in formulating my sentences, but rehabilitation has taken a backseat because of the gravity of your offending. Other provisions of the Sentencing Act that are of particular relevance to your case are as follows. Under Section 6A to 6F, you fall to be sentenced as a serious violent offender in respect of the 3 murders, meaning that the protection of the community is the principal purpose for which the sentences on those counts must be imposed. Under Section 6F, your status as a serious violent offender must be entered in the court records. Section 11(1) provides relevantly that if a court sentences an offender to be imprisonment for the term of her natural life, the court must, as part of the sentence, fix a period during which the offender is not eligible to be released on parole, unless it considers that the nature of the offence makes the fixing of such a period inappropriate. Section 11A(4)(a) provides that where an offender is sentenced to life imprisonment, the sentencer must fix a non-parole period of at least 30 years, unless it is not in the interests of justice to do so. Is it inappropriate to fix a non-parole period? Would fixing a non-parole period be contrary to the interests of justice? As mentioned above, this is the main dispute that I have to determine. Sentencing case law establishes that as a general rule, harsher than normal conditions of imprisonment will warrant mitigation of penalty. There is nothing about your conduct whilst in custody which might cast doubt on the application of that general rule. As Ms Hosking indicated, you are in a management unit to protect you from other prisoners, not vice versa, nor do you have any relevant criminal history. In their written submissions, the prosecution conceded that your conditions of imprisonment are more burdensome than for a mainstream prisoner, and that they are likely to remain so for the foreseeable future. The prosecution submitted that this is a, quote, relevant consideration for sentence. In oral submissions, the prosecution conceded that this consideration was not just relevant, but, quote, important and, quote, weighty, while still pressing for life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. You have effectively been held in continuous solitary confinement for the last 15 months, and at the very least, there is a substantial chance that for your protection, you will continue to be held in solitary confinement for years to come. The Court of Appeal in Yat against the King referred without criticism to the observation that, quote, the adverse health effects of solitary confinement are well established. I note too that Ms Hosking stated at the plea hearing that, quote, being separated has negative outcomes for people. We're very aware of that. The harsh prison conditions that you have experienced already and the likely prospect of solitary confinement for the foreseeable future are important and weighty considerations which should count for something in the sentencing exercise. In my view, the only scope for making them count is by the fixing of a non-parole period. In opposing the imposition of a non-parole period, the prosecution relied on the Queen against Colston, where the offender was sentenced to life imprisonment without a non-parole period for the savage murders of 3 people. But that case makes clear that, quote, where there is a substantial factor pointing towards clemency, as I consider your present and likely future conditions of imprisonment to be, the fixing of a non-parole period may be appropriate even for an offender who has committed multiple murders. Fixing a non-parole period is not to undervalue the horrendous nature of your offending. Your total effective sentence will be life imprisonment, and the period during which you will be ineligible for parole will be a very substantial one. Please stand. For the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson, I sentence you to 25 years imprisonment. For the murder of Heather Wilkinson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. For the murder of Gail Patterson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. For the murder of Don Patterson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. All sentences are to be served concurrently. The total effective sentence is life imprisonment, and I fix a non-parole period of 33 years. I declare that you have served 676 days by way of pre-sentence detention. Finally, and by consent, I make the disposal order sought by the prosecution. Would you please remove Ms. Patterson?
Okay, that was Justice Christopher Beale there, live from the Victoria Supreme Court, sentencing triple murderer Erin Patterson to life in prison with a non-parole period of 33 years. Now, we heard him say to the court there that he had no hesitation in finding that the offending fell into the worst category for the offences of murder and attempted murder. But he acknowledged that Erin Patterson's prison conditions, given her notoriety, are burdensome, and that prompted that non-parole period that he set there. Now, as we saw there, this was a live broadcast, and that is the first time this has been allowed by the Victoria Supreme Court. Our court reporter inside the Supreme Court there described Erin Patterson as sitting in the dock glum-faced as her sentence was being read, blinking rapidly there. Now, Ian Wilkinson, who is the sole guest who survived the mushroom lunch, was sitting about 10 metres to Patterson's left and has been described as having his arms crossed during that sentencing. And this case, of course, revolved around a lunch in July 2023. That was where Erin Patterson served beef Wellington laced with poisonous mushrooms. That was to her in-laws and family friends. 2 years later, in July this year, after a 2-month trial which heard evidence from more than 50 witnesses, Erin Patterson was found guilty of 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. So she has been sentenced for that today. The victims in this case, Don and Gail Patterson, Erin's in-laws, both aged 70, and...
Incoming Paul voice. Incoming Paul voice. Incoming Paul voice. Incoming Paul voice. Y'all, that was so fascinating. I've never seen, I mean, obviously, none of us have. I've never seen something like that before. Wait, let's see what she's going to say. Hold on.
Tell us what Justice Beale had to say about that decision of his.
Yeah, Gemma, you're right. So that is a head sentence of life in prison for the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson, 25 years for the murder of Heather, life for the murder of Gail Patterson, life, and for the murder of Don Patterson, life in prison. All of those sentences must be served concurrently, and she's been given a non-parole period of 33 years, which would mean that she'd be eligible for parole when she's in her 80s effectively. Now, as you heard there, Justice Beale ran through the offending. He went through...
Okay, y'all, so first of all, fascinating when they described her conditions, like she literally just sits in there and does nothing. So she has the option to contact a prisoner with an intercom. She chooses not to. Now, did y'all catch how he said that the only physical like in person is with the terrorist lady? Just like, I mean, I'm like, the fact that he was like, she's chosen not to, I'm like, well, I mean, do you blame her on that one? But also, did you hear him say, it was like a prison guard who initiated that, not her. So she has chosen to not have any contact with anybody. Do you know how, I mean, that I would be going crazy. I'd be like, well, let me go on out there and talk to her. I'll talk to her in the cage. Yeah. Taryn says the terrorists probably want to talk to her. And I mean, literally, right? See, she'll be in her 80s. I mean, I thought the way he was talking, he was going to be like, no parole. And then at the very end, when he started talking about like basically like her conditions are so torrid, and essentially look at the karma of this. Her notoriety, what she did is so terrible. It's basically going to keep her in this miserable, isolated situation for a long time. It sounds like they're way more, and I don't know how you say it, like, I don't know if the word is attentive, but like the way he was describing how like, oh, well, this person said this about her, like where they're monitoring her and her behavior and her conditions more here than they do in like an American system that we hear about. And we certainly don't hear about it in this context, the way that he described everything. Like his sentencing and stuff like that, where they're going over all the prison records and all this stuff. Like, that was interesting. Yeah, I thought he was leading up to no parole. But, I mean, to me, I'm just reading your comments. To me, the way he made it sound like is he took into consideration that she kind of lives almost like a miserable, like an extreme situation, more so than other prisoners. Yeah, Crafting says they also have far fewer prisoners in Australia than the U.S. It might be easier to monitor things like communication. Good point. Is that Ian? Oh, yeah, they're talking to Ian over there. Or they were, or they are. Yeah, I mean, my take is they're never going to. She's never going to get out. Like I said, she'll die in prison before that comes up. Oh wait, there's Ian and Simon. So yeah, she's just gonna have this miserable, and at some point she's gonna have to. I mean, she doesn't have to, but I don't know, like if it's gonna work the same way when she goes off to prison, because the way they're saying, like she's in a cell, they bring her food, she can contact somebody in intercom, but she doesn't want to. I mean, I feel like she's gonna end up having to have some form of contact on some level. But I mean, how long do you sit? How long can she sit in that situation? She's done so for what they said, 15 months in that level of condition. What was it like before them? Oh, thanks, KD. Kate says it must be weird for a judge to make a sentence he knows he won't be alive to see finish. A big responsibility. Oh, that's wild. I didn't even think about that. That's a good point. Thanks, Peppa. I appreciate it. Hey, Matt. How's it going? Matt says eventually she'll be let out of solitary. Yeah, I figured so. Yeah, it'll be. So she's just been in there festering. Just sitting in that cell, festering. And I guess she's still staying. Now, again, she can appeal in 28 days. So we'll see if she appeals. I'm sure she will. What else? I mean, like, why wouldn't you? Oh, I appreciate that, Kay. Yeah, the way that he was talking, I literally thought he was going to be like, no parole. And I was like, wow. Thanks, Andressa. I hope I said your name right. I was going to be like, wow. I mean, he was like going in. I was like, oh, yeah, he's calling her out. Right? Like, he is just going down the list of like, you did this, you wore white pants to the gas station. You sniffed to the gas station food. It's almost like a weird little like, I don't know if it was like, how do you say it? I don't even know the words I'm looking for. Like pity on her, maybe? I don't know. I know, right? Everybody's really upset. Yeah, it does sound like, so I guess for Australia, I mean, people who are from there, thanks Peachy Keen. For people who are from there, let me know, is this an extreme sentence for Australia? Because like, depending on what state you're in over here, like life can mean like life or like natural life, but like life is like life. And it sounds like what y'all are saying over there is it could be like 15 to 25 years. And then with the paroles, like you could get life, but only do 15 years, or whatever. They're all gathered around. No, it's normal. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if they're all very fascinated with the TV camera. Look at the thing. He's like, hey, we're on TV, boy. We're on TV. Oh, Lord. Oh, here, back up. Back up. He's like, oh, is that TV? TV. They're all so fast. It's funny. I can't. I tried an Australian accent. I can't do it. So I just revert back to my usual telly. He's like, is that telly? Hello? He wants in on it. He's going to have his moment. Why do they only realize they're on it when they... It's so funny watching the people try and get out of this shot. They all do the same thing. They go from there to the other thing. And then they're like, oh, bloody, I'm still in the bloody thing. And a quick hide behind the pole. It's funny. Good day, mate. So yeah, it will be interesting to see if anybody close to it, like if Simon or somebody does a book, so that we can learn a little bit more of the inside of it or whatever. It'll be very interesting. So there you go. It'll be interesting to see how our transition to prison goes, the whole 9 yards. Oh, Crafting, thanks for being a member for so long. I appreciate you. Rye Blue Sky. I haven't put my video out on it on the unknown number documentary. I'm gonna record it tomorrow, but tomorrow night's live chat is gonna be on unknown number. I just haven't posted it yet. I was working on the thumbnail before we went live here. So I'm gonna it's gonna be tomorrow night at 7 though. And that's gonna be, I can't wait to talk to you about that. So yeah, if you got Netflix and you want to do homework, unknown number. That's what it is tomorrow night. That, y'all, I cannot get you there. And Dr. Barry's done a couple of videos on it too. Oh, I know. I was like sitting here with my mouth on the floor over that. Yeah, they're talking about the interest in this case, and again, yeah, I was talking about it earlier, and like they said too. And for me, being here in the States, part of it was the unfolding of information that came out with the mushroom case, because it's not like here in the States where everything's just like people are getting the FOIA docs and the this and the that and the blah, 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 blah. It was like, I mean, we're still learning stuff like what a prison life was like, right? So there was that, but then it was like like they said, I mean, Erin was kind of like could be your next door neighbor. And then it was like death cap mushrooms. Like so many of us were like, what are death cap mushrooms? You know what I mean? Like I never even heard of it. And then when we heard what a horrible death it is, and it's like, is she what? Like no, it must be no. And then, huh? I think that's just why. I mean, it's the evilness of it. And you said you had the bits and pieces. It's like for me, it was the bits and pieces coming out. They just kept everything, and again, the bizarreness of it. Like this woman invited her family over, fed them this poisonous thing, talked to them, made these lies up, and it just kept coming and coming. And remember, this is like, I think it took place during COVID, that zone. Very similar like Megan Boswell. These massive cases that kind of hit around that time just got dragged out. Yeah, it was that. Yeah, Nina, it was. Okay, that unknown number is crazy. Yeah, that's the part. Trek says she was looking at them right in the eye while she ate how. Oh, wait, hold on. Please hold.
To Victoria Police, in particular, the Homicide Squad, and the team led by Detective Stephen Eppingstall. They made a professional, efficient, and effective investigation into what happened at the lunch. They brought to light the truth of what happened with the death of 3 good people. We're grateful for their skills that brought this truth to light. And I'm also very grateful for the kindness and compassion they showed us, me and my family, throughout the long process that has brought us to this day. They've done a wonderful job. I'd like to extend gratitude too to the team from the Office of Public Prosecutions, led by Senior Counsel Nanette Rogers. The court processes are a little bewildering to lay people like me, and we're grateful for their expertise, their hard work, and their perseverance that has secured this conviction. I'd also like to commend them for their kindness and compassion showed to us throughout this long process. They have also done a wonderful job. We're also grateful for the staff of the various public health services that played an important role in dealing with the aftermath of the lunch. There are so many services and agencies and people involved that I can't start naming names. But please, each one, accept my sincere gratitude for the part that you have played in this process. We're thankful that when things go wrong, there are good people and services and systems available to help us recover. I'd like to encourage all those involved to keep turning up and serving others. Our lives and the life of our community depends on the kindness of others. I'd like to encourage everybody to be kind to each other. Finally, I want to say thank you to the many people from across Australia and around the world who, through their prayers and messages of support, have encouraged us. I thank the people of the Leongatha and Currumbara communities in particular. Your thoughtfulness and care has been a great encouragement to us. That's all I wish to say for now. Please respect our privacy as we continue to grieve and heal. Thank you for listening. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.
And that was live there from outside the Victoria Supreme Court. Ian Wilkinson, the sole surviving guest of that lunch, showing grace, expressing his gratitude there after the court process and the sentencing today. That breaking news we have had. Erin Patterson, the mushroom murderer, triple murderer who has been sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 33 years. With Justice Beale there today in that live broadcast in what was a first for the Victoria Supreme Court. Telling the court he had no hesitation in finding that the offending falls into the worst category for the offences of murder and attempted murder. But he also acknowledged there the prison conditions that Erin Patterson has been subjected to, given her notoriety and the fact that she has to be separated for so many hours of the day, and then granting that non-parole period of 33 years, which he had the option not to grant in that. Now, our reporter Alexandra Alvaro is outside the Supreme Court and joins us once again. Alex, we just heard there from Ian Wilkinson, and we know that his victim impact statement was key during this process. How has he conducted himself, and how important was his testimony in this?
Yeah. Look, Ian Wilkinson has been, he's been part of this trial every day. He was listening to evidence throughout that 11 weeks. Every single day, displaying a huge amount of stoicism, usually with his arms crossed with a pretty neutral expression in the courtroom. Today, same thing in court from all accounts, and he's just spoken outside the court, as you heard. But in terms of his victim impact statement, last time we were in court, he said that essentially it's one of the distressing shortcomings of society that in these cases, so much attention is showered on the accused. But when it comes to the victims,
Incoming Paul voice, incoming Paul voice, incoming Paul voice, incoming Paul voice. There we are. So, y'all, for those who just joined before we kind of call it an evening here, so Erin Patterson has been sentenced. She was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 33 years. She'll be in her 80s when she is eligible for parole. The judge granted, I would say, the Justice Beale, I would say, had some mercy on her by even giving her the option, right? I mean, he took into account that she has a pretty severe housing situation at the jail. So, there's that. And yeah, that was Ian who just spoke. And, God bless. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking the 9-week trial, that man going constantly, I mean, that's brutal and grueling to sit there through that. And I don't know how they are in Australian courts, if they are taking breaks, and it seems way more formal. Not saying the courts here aren't formal, but there's like a little bit of like, hey, does anyone need a break here? I don't know if it goes the same way there, but I mean, I can't imagine sitting in there for that many hours a day. But I mean, again, she killed his family. Of course he's going to want to, right? Oh, thanks, Dr. Barry, for being here. I appreciate it. Yeah, this was, and again, for those, I mean, this is new to me, right? Yeah, Caitlin, I would love to hear from Erin's sister about their childhood. Here's the other thing, too. We're now going to see even more information come forth now that the sentence has happened. Now that the sentence has happened, you'll see even more stuff come out. So the more I learn about it, I mean, the more it's just, Lisa's a private room, not having to share. That part does sound nice about the situation she's in. About having your own little room. That's the one, like, little, the silver lining for her, I guess, is that she gets, like, your own private accommodations. And she seems to be fine with not talking to anybody. Now, granted, we'll see how prison does. Yeah, she's got all sorts of little things in there to keep her busy and going. So y'all, I'm gonna head out. It's past my bedtime. I'm tired, but we followed this for years, right? I mean, who knew that in the 2025 we've seen Lori Who all have we seen this year? Lori, Erin Patterson, Megan Boswell, Donna Adelson, Brian Koberger, Stefan Stearns. I mean, major cases coming to a close. So, and Erin's just another one, right? So we'll see. So anyway, so that is it. Tomorrow night on this channel, we'll be doing a live stream about unknown number. And then tomorrow's video on the main channel is about Nick Casotis, his interrogation. Y'all, that's another, you can't make this stuff up, and that case is one of them. So if you haven't been familiar with it and want something to listen to before you go to bed, so let's see what we're talking about tonight. Nick Casotis interrogation. You're welcome. You will be like, what did I just watch? So that's it. Thank you, Emily, for being here. Thank you, Emily, for keeping us updated on CrimeCon. I hope you have a wonderful last evening. Yeah, you're still there till tomorrow. A wonderful last evening at CrimeCon, and a wonderful day tomorrow. Keep in touch. Let me know your travels and that you're safe and all that. And that's it. So I do appreciate you, Sofa Squad. I love y'all, and I hope that y'all will. Oh yeah, and hold on. Dr. Barry says if you want a link to Heather's interview, Dr. Barry has hold on. Dr. Barry interviewed Heather, who is Nick's, what was it, first wife. So if you're familiar with the case, you definitely want to watch Dr. Barry's video for sure. And if you're not familiar with the case, you want to watch the video. So yeah, definitely check all that out, y'all. Thank you, Emily. All right, everybody. We'll close with Slow Morrison's Ode to the Sofa. And that's it. I will see y'all in the morning and tomorrow night. I love y'all. Thank you. I'll talk soon.
The pillows are fluff thanks to Miss Emily. The couch is wide enough. Join the family. It's all love while we laugh at Perk's criminalities. Hey, 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 welcome to the Sofa Squad. Sipping from the cup that, hey, 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 come laugh with the Sofa Squad. Can't roll my damn eyes hard enough. Oh, please, the puppies need me. Ooh, oh, please, my body is rejecting none of that fancy credential stuff. I'm just here for the cringe binge. Hey, 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 welcome to the Sofa Squad. Sipping from the cup that, hey, 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 come laugh with the Sofa Squad. Can't roll my damn eyes hard enough. Oh, please, the puppies need me. Oh, please, my body is rejecting none of that fancy credentialed stuff. I'm just here for the cringe binge. Hey, 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 welcome to the Sofa Squad. Sipping from the cup that, hey, 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 come laugh with the Sofa Squad. Can't roll my damn eyes hard enough.